3 must-see moments from Trump's interview with Tucker. Former President Donald Trump decided to skip the first GOP presidential debate and do a live interview with Tucker Carlson at the exact same time. Couldn't tune into Trump's interview? Don't worry. We got you covered.
Biden and thinks someone else has got to be running the government.
Well, somebody else has to be. I don't think he's capable of doing anything. Look, when I debated him, I said, how come, and this was in front of probably not a friend of yours, Chris Wallace. He was the moderator.
Not a friend.
I said, why is it he wants to be Mike, but he doesn't have the talent? It's one of those
bitchy little man.
He wanted to be his father, but he didn't have the talent of his father was great. His father,
little fussy man.
His father interviewed me in 60 Minutes. It was actually a 10. Can you believe it?
No, I totally believe his father had talent, at least.
I may have been the only guy that he gave a good 60 Minutes to. He was rough.
Really?
His father was tough. He was great, though. He was great at what he did. But Chris Wallace was so upset. He was guarding this guy who wouldn't do a show, by the way. He wouldn't do. I figured I didn't mind Chris Wallace because Biden wouldn't do a show. And it was very obvious. He kept asking him, but he wouldn't do the show. So I figured he's got to like me. But he came from a different planet. But remember when I asked the question, why is it that the mayor of Moscow's wife is allowed to give you $3.5 million? Don't forget, that was brought up. Now it's brought up all the time. But that was brought up by me long before anyone ever heard of it. I said, the mayor of Moscow's wife giving you $3.5 million. What did you do to deserve $3.5 million? To Biden. And Chris Wallace said, this has nothing to do with the debate. I mean, he
got in the way of the question.
No, it was crazy. And I said, well, wait a minute. He got $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife. Now, people forget that, but if you go back and take a look, you will see. And Chris Wallace didn't want me to ask that question. I said, I think it's a very appropriate question. It turned out to be much more appropriate than people thought. The people see it, like this horrible district attorney from just a little while ago, from essentially Atlanta, that's Fulton County. She said, basically, I don't have any right to challenge an election. Well, what about Stacey Abrams? What about Hillary Clinton? What about all of these Democrats that are still challenging my election? The same people that are saying he's challenging an election challenged my election. And they did it with slates. They did it with all sorts of things. They were very bad about it. But basically, they're suing me and they're saying, you don't have any right to challenge it. If you challenge an election, we're going to indict you and put you in jail. So what they're doing is they've weaponized, and don't kid yourself, the DOJ and Biden and the whole group.
So last question, if you're elected president again, what's your number one priority? When you ran last time, you said, I will build a wall. This time, your bottom line top promise to the country.
So you can do numerous things at the same time.
Of course.
But let's say number one is a border and taking hundreds of thousands of criminals that have been allowed into our country and getting them out and bringing them back to their country, Guatemala. By the way, not only the 4 countries that we think of as neighbors, all over the world. Last month, we had 149 countries represented. Think of it. We had 149 countries represented, Tucker, from places that many people never even heard of, coming into our country. And they're coming in from mental institutions, and they're coming in from prisons. They're emptying out their prisons all over South America. They're emptying out their mental institutions. Terrorists are pouring into our country. We have no idea. I had the strongest border in the history of our country, and I built almost 500 miles of wall. They like to say, oh, was it less? No. I built 500 miles. In fact, if you check with the authorities on the border, we built almost 500 miles of wall. And I had another 200 that I was going to build. It's like water, it seeks. And we're going to build another 200. We built it. It was all set to go. All they had to do was install it. It would have taken 3 weeks. And that's when I found out. I said, I think these people actually want open borders. The first thing I would do would be I would seal up the border good and tight, except for people that want to come in legally.